Matt and JD are back, and in this video, we're going to look at a King's Indian defense that JD played against his coach and training partner. What else do you want to tell us about the game, JD?
Well, at first, he's an IM. So, like, I need to, especially because we're going to get to the results of this game, we have to note that he's an IM. So, but in his defense, he's playing the lines that I'm picking. So, like, this is not in, like, basically saying, hey, take this random position you may have never seen before and play it against me and see what happens. That's really how it went down. But it's straight out of the Caricon, or not the Caricon course, our D4 course, and this kid line where we get this set up and they play C5. Like, these structures, I don't really feel as comfortable in as I do in the lines where E5 gets played. And so I asked him to play a couple of these lines, and we're going to see what happens. So he chose the C5 early. And when they go this way, we just play knight F3. We don't play G4. And we can actually get into some problems with this. And I think the issue is that we don't want to end up having to put a bishop or a queen on this D4 square, because then the knight's going to come in with tempo. So we have to play knight F3. And then after takes, knight C6, bishop to E2. This is still part of the course. Castles, he takes. This is, again, still part of the course. I play queen C2. And after here, we reach the end of the line. So I guess technically in the course, we give A5 earlier, but we've transposed kind of back into it. And I mean, this is a kind of position that feels a little lifeless to me, because I don't quite understand what's going on here. I know in our course notes, we say that my threat is to take here, and then I'm going to have this good knight versus bad bishop, although it doesn't seem like that bad of a bishop to me. Do you have a comment on this, Matt? Like, why is taking the knight such a threat?
So what we have here is a Marazzi bind structure. And the way we want to play this Marazzi bind is we want to stick our knight on D5. This is our bad bishop. So if black allows us to take, like let's just give black a random move like we sometimes do. Takes. We can plant this knight on D5. And the idea now is we can play either like F4 and expand on the king side, or we can play like B3, A3, B4 and expand on the queen side. And I see the computer saying, don't be so quick to stick that knight in here, but that's kind of the long-term idea. You want to plant that knight in the center, and then we have space on both flanks to play with. And this is
And I
kind of
suppose
typical Marazzi bind advantage.
I suppose I'm going to try to stick all my pawns on light squares and essentially try to turn the bishop into a bad bishop.
Yeah, or if you can get their pawns on light squares, even better.
Yeah. So went with the backup plan because, he didn't allow this. And our idea is kind of nice, actually. He had two choices to move the knight, here or here. And no matter which way he goes, he went to C5, so we advance E5. If he went to E5, we advance C5. And the point is that this pawn is pinned, it can't move forward. And so we end up with a weakness. So
Yeah.
I think we're very clearly out of the opening at this point. But we've got our structural advantage that we won here. We have this D6 pawn to play against, and again, it's not clear though exactly to me how I was going to improve. So I just decided, well, let's just pile up against the pawn and see what happens. And I'm not really making any threats to take it. Well, I am now. But F5, I thought was a pretty annoying move from him. I wasn't really expecting this. But it is kind of annoying because I would ideally like to put my bishop on F3. But, that's just silliness. So I had to come back to E2.
What if you play bishop to F3 there?
Well, I just thought this was garbage. But I suppose
There's a trick.
oh, there's a trick. Oh, okay. So this is the trick. You move the queen. So say here, maybe?
And then queen C3.
And then I can go take this way.
Yeah.
And then this pawn's definitely going to fall.
So that's a nice little tactic because that bishop on C6 for black was a monster. And you knew you wanted to trade it off. You just don't want to have to accept the doubled pawns.
Yeah, that's a nice little trick. That's a nice trick. So I went back to E2 instead. And then the rook comes up to defend. And now I'm sort of forced to come up with like a plan because I don't have any good way to add any additional pressure against D6. It's defended a sufficient number of times. And so I came up with this plan of just advancing my pawns
I like it.
I thought if I can shove these pieces back, Then I can maybe play bishop f3. I can maybe play knight b5, but neither of those can I do right now. The thing is, though, I can't just play a3 with the idea of heading straight into b4 because, I mean, a4 is annoying. And now I will never get to play b4 because I always take en passant. So I had to be a bit slower. So I played b3. My idea is b3, a3, and then b4.
That's a small, it looks like a small thing, but that's important, I think, for the viewers to understand. You don't want to play a3, allowing black to stop the b pawn.
Yeah, so it's just this little maneuver. This little maneuver where you have to step b3, then a3, then b4 actually comes up all the time.
Mm-hmm. And it's when you see this pawn on a5, that's when you know to look for it.
Yeah, so queen to e7 comes in. And yeah, a3, continuing on my plan, and then f4, which surprised me. And but I guess the idea is simply to play f3 at some point,
Yeah,
which
and
looks a
maybe
little
even
terrifying.
sacrifice. Black could
Yeah,
sacrifice it too.
yeah, even as a sacrifice. So I decided I went ahead with my plan, b4, which actually is kind of a mistake. Apparently, I should get the bishop out of the way of this f3, or even just drop back, so that if you now play f3, I can just play g3 and ask you how you're going to make any progress over here. And then I can continue on with my plan.
Yeah, this
Something
looks
like this.
scary, but b4 is coming.
Yeah, b4 comes. This bishop is suddenly not quite as beautiful as it used to be. And if I have to, I can even put my king on h2. And this seems pretty solid because if you ever advance the pawns, I'm going to leave my pawns side by side. And as soon as they're contact, whichever way, I'll switch past and just lock it all up entirely.
I think we
Uh,
should give your opponent a lot of credit here too. Like finding this idea, pushing the f pawn, it's creating some problems for you. Like if he doesn't do that, your plan is very straightforward and you're not likely to make a big mistake coming up.
that's true. That's true. So b4 happens, takes, and now the knight has to move. And of course, I felt like I got to take the knight, right? What else am I going to do? So I take, and then bishop takes. Again, pretty natural, but I put the queen on c3 because I thought it was nice that I was pinning this rook. I thought somehow the f3 would have less venom this way. And I am actually making a threat now just to win the pawn because of the pin.
Do you
So
feel like you
queen to
should have
e.
played something different?
Um, no, I'm still pretty happy with this move. Although I suppose I I do still want to get rid of this bishop. So I mean, bishop to d3 maybe makes sense. And then if f3, can I get away with taking? Takes, and then push best maybe. Nah, I don't know.
I kind of like the way you played it. It feels low risk too.
Yeah. So yeah, I played this way here, and again, I don't want to trade queens. I trade queens. This pawn comes to e4, and it just sort of seems to help with his attack. I realize I get the open files, but I didn't want to get rid of this weakness for him. So I just played queen to d4 and said, "You want to trade? You trade." So queen to g5 doesn't want to trade. I mean, he's clearly going for the attack here, and it seems slightly scary to me. So I played f3 thinking I was going to shut this down now. And I think I'm just going to win a pawn or something now. I mean, bishop f5 happens, and we are definitely threatening to take this pawn. And I actually kind of like my next move. I played queen to d5. Point is, you can't take this now, right?
And what if rook
And
e5? That was the
yeah,
first thing I was.
rook e5. I want a pawn with check,
Okay, and if rook f7?
which was what was played.
Oh, we're in the game
I
line. Okay.
Yeah, we're in the game. This is what was played. And I went queen b8. And my point is that yes, you're going to take this pawn, but I really didn't see how you were going to do anything against this. So takes, and then bishop f1, and I've got plenty of defenders. And how are you defending this pawn?
That's nice calculation on your part, JD, because when I looked at that, I thought you're allowing this black attack, bishop takes h3, but you're right. What does he do next? Like, how does he increase that attack?
And I mean, the answer is he just flat doesn't. I mean, he plays queen g3 with the intention of playing rook to g5, which, again, even if he gets that, he's still not making a threat against my g2 pawn.
Yeah, queen takes f3 would be the only threat, but you could pretty easily defend it.
Yeah, so I played here, and now if you play queen takes f3, I'll take your rook with check, so you can't do that. But I have kind of a nice idea though, because he plays rook g5 as expected, and after queen to d4, check, queen to f2, the queens are forced off the board. You have no way of avoiding the queen trade now, and the rest of the game is a little bit of a mop-up job. Actually,
Wow.
I'm quite happy with the way that this went. So he, of course, brings out, and I don't have to, but I just feel a whole lot safer in this world if there's no queens on the board. Takes, and
And
then advance the pawn and
this
open up my bishop. And I have these two connected pass pawns, and my king is perfectly safe now. And I think that this is pretty straightforward.
it
He
feels like
plays
you're up
here.
2 pawns. The extra
It does
pawn
feel
on the
like I'm.
king side is nothing.
Yeah, there was a moment where I needed to be a little bit careful. I mean, rook d4 actually turns out, I didn't know this, but rook d4 turns out to be the only move. I mean, the problem is this pawn's hanging, and if I push it, then this pawn hangs. And if I did something like this, apparently, it's not great. Oh, I see the idea. Rook
There is a
h4.
threat. Yeah, there is a
Yeah, rook.
threat. Okay.
Yeah, rook h4, and yeah, I'm in. Yeah, I have to be quite careful. I have to play bishop d3. You here? I have to play here. And now, oh, rook e5, threatening mate, and I have to go back, and then here, and I have to go back, and it's
Repetition.
perpetual.
Yeah.
Man, that
Okay,
would
I
be
was
wild.
I was sleeping on that threat. I wonder if your coach saw that. He must have saw that threat.
He's a tricky guy. So to be fair, he knows that I mean, he's high 2400s is his FIDE rating, and he's playing me. And and he's playing lines that I'm asking him to play. I feel like that he often just goes for this super aggressive stuff and doesn't really calculate if it's going to work. He just
Hmm.
putting me under a bunch of pressure and then giving me some chances to try to figure it out. And I think he's intentionally not necessarily calculating thoroughly or solidly. And I think that's to my advantage that he does that. And
Okay.
I have gotten a few wins because of this, I think. But I think that it's actually just good coaching because he's giving me opportunities to try to figure some stuff out.
Yeah, that's
So
great.
and so instead, I mean, I want everything off the board. So this to me felt like a no-brainer because I get a set of rooks off the board, and I mean, it's hard to avoid this without him just backing up being passive. Takes comes here, and actually, I got a little bit worried here actually because I feel like the threat is to take. Because notice my king is a little bit stuck, and if he gets rook to e1, how am I ever getting that rook out? And then I was worried that like okay, random move. And I was worried that something like this would happen, random move. And now I was worried that something like this, and then mate is
Right.
what I was worried
And
about.
your rook can't get back to help that bishop. He's kind of
Yeah,
stuck.
yeah. The only way I can try it, there's no way. My king stuck. So I was worried about something like this. And so that's why I decided I'm rook d1, I'm covering my first rank, and I'll figure it out from here. He brings the king up. I mean, I get my pieces out. And now I just advance the pawn, and here he resigns. Because what else? I mean, what else? This is pretty simple and straightforward now.
And I like where you put this bishop on e4, defended by f3, pointing all the way across the queen side. So that bishop does an awesome job supporting the pawns in combination with the rook.
Yeah, so I felt pretty happy about this game, and I think it was a nice execution of this e5 idea, which you talk about in the course notes to the d4 course, but we don't actually get into any lines. And so this is my first time really like essaying the position and sort of understanding. I think if I were going to play differently after takes, I think sort of blindly going in against this pawn with just trying to brute force double probably isn't as great as it looks. Something like maybe queen d2, maybe perhaps makes a bit more sense. I'm still putting the same pressure on. And if you just try to defend it, I mean, maybe the rook belongs in the e file, which is also open. I even have knight d5 ideas. You take it, and again, I can give this check. This is a nice little check. The king has to move,
And
and
rook
I take with
takes.
the rook. Take with the rook, and this is not something I wasn't. I mean, of course, I thought about knight d5, but I remembered we want to trade our bishop for their knight, and I was like, that must inverse mean that I don't want to trade my knight for their bishop, and
Well, you know
so
what
that's
you
why.
want? You want full control of d5. So knight d5 here right away is a good idea too. Because after takes, this rook is hard to dislodge out of d5. And this bishop can now come back to f3 on the long diagonal. But I really liked your point about like, no matter which way this knight goes right here, you're
Mm-hmm.
pushing the opposite pawn. I think that's a great point. And if the knight doesn't move, you take. So if you can remember that, you're going to get into one of these middle games that kind of highlights what we're looking at so far.
And definitely. So yeah, happy with this win. It went far better than I thought it was going to, although we played a second game and it was a little shakier.
We'll look at
A
that
lot.
one next.
A lot shakier. Let's be honest here.
Thanks for showing this game, JD. We'll see you guys in
Yeah.
the next video.
All right.